You wake to the sound of falling snow, though you can't hear it. Only see the soft descent through a broken window where the glass still clings like frost-bitten wings. Outside, Stalingrad is a cathedral of ash and ice. The streets are nameless now, every sign torn down, every building burned into memory. The Volga is frozen, a white scar across the map of the world. And you are still breathing, somehow. Before you drift off, take a moment to subscribe, but only if stories told in whispers are your kind of thing. And tell us where you're listening from, or which image lingers with you the most. Because this is not just a story of war. It's a story of staying when everything else left. You're listening to Echoes of War. The air tastes of coal smoke and old paper. Somewhere a kettle has frozen mid-boil, a gesture of defiance against the winter. Men move like ghosts through the ruins, Soviet soldiers wrapped in bandages that have forgotten their color. They no longer march. They drift. Their faces are carved from months of hunger and firelight. Eyes that have seen too much, now turned inward toward survival. The city no longer fights. It simply endures. You step outside into the pale morning. The silence is heavy, thick as wool. It takes a moment to realize that silence itself is the victory. The shelling has stopped. Somewhere in the ruins, a German soldier coughs, a sound so ordinary it almost feels sacred. Another man answers in Russian, not with words, but with the simple scrape of boots across the floor, an acknowledgement that both are still here, both alive. You remember the stories whispered through the long nights, that the snow began to glow from the fires beneath it, that rats learned to walk in daylight without fear, that the city itself grew tired of being bombed and started to bury its dead in layers of ash. But what lingers now is not horror, it's stillness. Stalingrad has turned into a frozen lung, breathing out smoke, breathing in silence. You walk past what was once a tram stop. A rusted frame leans against a wall, its timetable still nailed to the brick, though no one reads it anymore. In a corner, a photograph of a woman smiles from under a layer of soot. She has survived longer than most. Nearby, a Soviet medic, her coat torn, her hands trembling, bends over a man who no longer needs her. She closes his eyes with the gentleness of someone tucking in a child. The snow begins to fall again, erasing even that gesture. In the distance, you hear a voice. It is soft, almost lost to the wind. They're surrendering. The Germans, they're surrendering. The words drift like ashes, carried from one ruined window to another until the entire city seems to breathe them. No cheering follows. Only the sound of boots crunching on ice as men emerge from cellars, blinking into a light that no longer explodes. You feel the weight of it settle on your shoulders, not triumph, but relief. A fragile, trembling kind of peace. The kind that can break if spoken too loudly. You kneel and touch the frozen ground. It is warm beneath the surface. The warmth of bodies, of memory, of a million lives pressed into this soil. You realize then that this city, this graveyard of brick and snow, has done something no army ever could. It has survived by refusing to move, by enduring. You close your eyes, and for a moment you can almost hear the heartbeat of the Volga beneath the ice. Not victory, just continuation. Chapter 1. Before the Fire. River morning. You stand on the embankment before dawn, where the Volga holds its breath. Mist lifts in slow, silvery skeins. A gull carves the air with the patience of a scribe. The water smells of wet rope and iron, and the stone beneath your boots remembers every step taken to work, to market, to war, to home. The city breathes with the river, out through whistles and shouts, in through fog and quiet. Light, metal, breath, silence. 4 small truths before the day begins. Somewhere below the bluff, a tugboat coughs into being. Lanterns wink. A boy in a cotton cap carries a lunch wrapped in newspaper. A woman ties her scarf tighter against the river wind. A tram bell taps the morning like a spoon against glass. You hear the city's grammar, the clack of shoes, the friction song of steel on steel, the long vowel of the water. The air is workable, ordinary, forgiving. You lift your eyes, and there it is, a horizon built by hands. Stalingrad in the low light, brick and beam, chimney and crane, skeletal against the whitening sky. Not beautiful in the gentle way of old capitals, but beautiful in the way a lung is beautiful when it works. The factories line the banks like great animals at a watering place. Red October with its steel bones, Berikodi with its torches and anvils, the tractor plant where tanks will soon be born with heat and thunder. For now, there is only morning. They called this place Tsaritsyn once. They renamed it for Stalin, Stalingrad, industrial heart, river gate, a city with more purpose than ornament. By 1942, this stretch of the Volga anchors more than maps. It pins supply lines to reality, or to steel, grain to bread, oil to engines. Population, hundreds of thousands. Factories, the red pulse of the 5-year plans. Strategic value, a sentence written in bold across every staff officer's mind. For you, today, it is simply home. A baker's door opens on steam, and a brief heaven of crust and yeast rounds the corner. A cyclist glides past, coat flapping like a page left open by the wind. A policeman warms his hands and stamps the frost out of the day. You hear laughter ahead, clean, uncomplicated, and you let it pass through you like sunlight through dusty glass. The tram rattles by, and every window frames a life. The city works. You cross the yard at Red October with the others just as the whistle splits the air. Inside, heat blooms from furnaces as if the earth had a red heart, and this is where it beats. Sweat finds your temples even in the early hour. Hammer on plate, grinder on edge, the small blue stars of welders' sparks falling, falling. It is music with no melody but perfect timing. Light pours down as dust, turning every motion into a soft constellation. Someone tells a joke you can't hear. You laugh anyway, because laughter is communal here, not personal. It belongs to the air between you. A foreman checks his ledger, pencil traveling with a calm that has nothing to do with gentleness and everything to do with habit. The shelves hold parts that will become something stronger than you, something faster than breath. But in this moment they are just parts, stacked like words waiting for a sentence. They count production in millions, meters of steel, tons of plate, axle housings, shell casings. They will later count ruins in block numbers. Factory district, workers' settlements, the grain elevator south of the city. They will mark divisions and corps with Roman numerals, draw arrows toward a place on the river, and call it a plan. For now, the counting is simpler. 10 minutes to break, 5 to smoke, 3 to find the photo you keep in your pocket and press flat again. On the far side of the city, Berikodi's presses speak in a deep language of pressure and release. A woman in a kerchief signs for a pallet and rubs her wrist when no one's looking. She hums a melody from childhood, and it is the only soft thing in the room. Outside, a column of dust lifts from the road as a truck lumbers toward the river crossing. Everything seems to be moving in some measured way toward a measured end. You step out for air. The Volga has shaken off its mist and lies like hammered tin, a long plate of reflected sky. Children skate at the edge where winter still lingers, thin, risky ice, but they know the water and the water knows them. A dog barks at something the rest of you can't see, and somewhere beyond the bright edge of noon, a radio voice is reading numbers and names, names and numbers. in a cadence too even to be accidental. You look up, and the sky looks back, expressionless. The grain of every day. After work, you walk through the streets that memorize you. Blocks of worker housing bleached by sun, alleys that cure fish and conversation, courtyards where washing lines give the wind something decent to carry. In a doorway, an old man sharpens a knife on a stone he's used all his life. The blade and the motion have become a single idea. Across the street, a mother scolds gently and tucks a cap over ears that don't stay covered. The child scowls, then laughs, then scowls again. Apprenticeship in being human. At the market, women lay out apples that have kept their secret sweetness in cellars, carrots with frilled tops, jars that hold summer in amber. Someone sells bootlaces. Someone else sells a clock with no hour hand. Time is relative to need. Someone, always, sells hope under another name. The samovar at the corner canteen sighs. You grip the warm glass and watch the city perform its evening rituals. Lights flickering awake one by one, stairwells blooming into yellow tunnels, windows turning into squares of story. A radio somewhere plays a march. Another sings a folk tune that makes the air feel older than the buildings. They call 1942 the year of decisions. They will frame it with operations named as if the future could be commanded. Fall Blau, Case Blue, an arrow bending from the Don toward the Volga, then south toward the Caucasus and oil. Army Group B, 6th Army, terms efficient enough to hide the weight of men. Friedrich Paulus will command the thrust toward this river. Vasily Chukov will later grip the city like a knot in a rope. But this is before commanders become characters in a story the earth will not forget. You pass the grain elevator on the southern approach, its bulk patient and unpretentious against the sky. Grain dust hangs in the air and makes the light beautiful. A worker comes out covered in a fine gold that is really brown. He sneezes, wipes his nose with a practiced motion, looks at the river, and says nothing. He doesn't have to. The river answers him by existing. On the way home, you stop at the post. A thin envelope waits. A brother's letter from the West, stamps like small, tired medals along the corner. He writes of long trains, of days invented by marching, of boots that don't choose whose feet they hurt. He writes something he shouldn't and then crosses it out in a black square that somehow says more. At the end, be careful, be well. You fold the page and it warms in your pocket like a small stove. At your building the stair smells of cabbage and soap. Neighbors nod. Someone's radio spills news and static down the hall. Your room is what you can afford, and it holds everything you need. Bed, table, bowl, kettle, the photograph that proves a moment once stood still. You take off your boots, and the day steps away from you. You listen. You hear other lives moving softly in adjacent spaces, and it feels, rarely, preciously, like safety. Signals on the horizon. Night gathers its tools early that summer. The sunsets are so long they feel like an apology you don't deserve. Sky stripping itself down from blue to brass to ember. The river holds the last light like a secret it can't keep. Off to the west, low again this evening, a smudge you first mistook for weather continues to repeat itself. It is nothing, someone says. It is training, someone says. It is distance, someone says. Distance is harmless. But the radios speak with fewer songs and more numbers. Newspapers grow careful around their adjectives. Men who never raise their voices now stand closer to the set and pretend they're only adjusting the dial. Flyers appear, volunteer brigades, civil defense instructions, sandbag lists, blackout practice. A teacher explains to children how to walk to shelters, as if drawing chalk lines on a playground. The chalk breaks. You work, you eat, you sleep, you dream of the water. In the morning, The cranes still trace their elegant alphabets against the high blue. A barge noses into the quay with a patience that suggests there is nothing in the world but schedules. Workers' songs rise like steam and fall like dust. Even your fatigue becomes habit, a shoulder you know by the weight it lays on you. And then, between breaths, a sound enters the city that does not belong to it. Not the tug's cough, not the tram's vowel, not the chant of men under a beam. A far engine, and another, threads gathering into a coarse cloth you can feel even with your eyes closed. It arrives as a tremor of attention rather than fear. You look up through the furnace haze and the yard haze and the summer haze, and there is only sky, the guileless blue of ordinary days. They will later write August 23rd, 1942 as a date that changed the color of air. They will measure the raid by tonnage dropped and fires started and streets erased. They will count the dead by approximation because numbers cannot hold smoke. But here, in this last moment before the first bombs find their arguments, the city is whole in a way that feels almost private. A woman tying her scarf. A boy finishing a story on a stair. A worker stubbing a cigarette on a wall already crowded with other endings. The Volga showing its back to the sky, silvered, unafraid. You, with your hand on the warm rail at Red October's door, the metal holding the day's heat like a stored breath. The engines growl again, still distant, more numerous. Windows darken as if a cloud had passed. A match flares in someone's palm, bright enough to make an outline of bone, bright enough to promise continuity. He lifts it to a cigarette, inhales, and then, gentle, almost grateful, blows it out. The smoke rises, a thin line drawn straight up into the future. The city stands very still, listening to its own heartbeat. Before the fire, there is always a breath. Chapter 2. The First Fire. The sound arrives before the fire. It begins as an argument in the distance. Engines pressing against air, indistinct but persistent, like the growl of weather trying to remember its purpose. You stop what you're doing. Everyone does. The hammer pauses mid-arc. The tram brakes sigh. Even the Volga hesitates. You look up, and the light bends. The sun is too white, the shadows too long, and for a second you think, it's nothing. Just planes passing. Just sound misplaced by wind. But then the first whistle comes, high, sharp, and utterly indifferent. The bomb lands somewhere beyond the tractor factory, and the earth exhales through every crack in every wall. Dust lifts. Windows turn to breath and scatter. The second whistle finds the riverbank. The third walks down the boulevard like a drunkard with a torch. Then the air fills, hundreds of engines, thousands, each a note in a score composed for annihilation. The sound becomes the city. It eats the names of streets, swallows the language of work and play. You open your mouth to shout, but there is no air left to borrow. The ground has taken it all, holding its breath so the sky can burn. You don't run yet. You listen, because disbelief always takes a heartbeat longer than survival. When the air turns to glass. The next minutes are not minutes at all. They are fragments, light and darkness sewn together with screams and silence. You see the blast roll across Red October, a bloom of orange that eats geometry. The heat has shape. The light has weight. In the streets, glass moves faster than thought. It rains sideways, invisible until it finds a cheek, a neck, a pair of eyes. Buildings tilt, cough, then kneel. Wood sighs, metal screams, and brick learns to fly. You fall once. The ground shakes like a hand trying to wake you, then rise again into smoke that tastes of salt and sulfur. Someone shouts for water. Someone else drags a hose that hisses without pressure. A mother wraps a child in her coat, though the air itself is on fire. Her mouth forms a prayer that melts before it leaves her lips. The river flares as fuel depots erupt along its edge. Black columns rise, joining until the whole sky becomes a single wound. Sunlight still exists somewhere above it, but you will never see that color again the same way. You are inside a furnace pretending to be a city. They say later, 600 tons of bombs dropped in a single day. They say, 40,000 civilians gone before dusk. They say, August 23, 1942. But numbers don't scream. Only people do. Running through the burning map. You run without direction, because every direction is wrong. The ground shifts under you, cobblestones cracked like eggshells, rails twisted into cursive letters spelling nothing. A tram stands half melted at the crossing. Its passengers are shadows on the walls behind it. The air moves like liquid. Each breath feels borrowed from another person's lungs. A man beside you clutches a violin case. He doesn't know why he saved it. An old woman carries a mirror face down so it won't remember what it saw. A dog limps between flames, unbarking, unclaimable. At the river, crowds gather, silhouettes against the burning east. Boats already gone, docks already ash. People dive in, believing water can't burn. But oil from the tanks drifts out, slick and glistening, and the river catches. The Volga burns with them, not out of cruelty, but because fire recognizes fire. You stumble to your knees, hands against the frozen then boiling earth, and taste metal on your tongue. Somewhere a church bell rings itself apart. Somewhere a radio still speaks, its words now ghosts of order. Remain calm. Proceed to shelters. There are no shelters. Only holes already full of others. You crawl beneath a tramcar, press your face to the dirt, and count your heartbeats until they sound like artillery. The heat above ripples the air into waves. For a moment you imagine the sea, but it is only the city, burning in motion. The night without stars. When night finally comes, it brings no darkness. The fires have their own sun now, orange, endless, merciless. The city glows like a coal too stubborn to die. Shadows dance across ruins, confused about which way to fall. You walk through the bones of streets you once knew by name. A streetlight still stands, its glass globe shattered but still humming with current. It flickers as you pass, unsure whether to live or join the dead. At the riverbank, men pull survivors from water thick with ash. They are blackened figures speaking in whispers because loud voices break too easily. One of them offers you a rag to breathe through. It smells of oil and humanity. You nod. Gratitude has no vocabulary left. You find what's left of a wall and sit. Everything inside you trembles, but not from fear. You've simply run out of places to store what you've seen. A door frame leans nearby, still holding its shape, as if waiting for permission to be a home again. You rest your hand on it. It's warm. Above, planes still trace patterns in the smoke, silver fish in a poisoned sea. Each drop, each explosion, feels further away now, as if happening in another lifetime that happens to share your skin. The fire has its own rhythm, slow and mesmerizing. You almost fall asleep to it. You think of the morning that was, the boy with the lunch wrapped in paper, the whistle of the tram, the baker's steam. You remember colors. Blue, red, white, yellow. Now there is only orange and black. The palette of endings. And yet, even here, a breath persists. Someone hums. Someone helps another to stand. A soldier's hand holds a canteen to a stranger's lips. Tiny proofs that survival is still a kind of rebellion. When dawn finally stumbles back, she finds no city, only outlines, smoke, and silence pretending to rest. You rise from the ground and look east across the Volga. The water is grey now, shivering under ash. You could swear you hear it whisper, "Remember me as I was." You nod, because forgetting would be the final fire. Chapter 3. Under the Rubble. The room that wasn't a room. You wake inside a shape the bomb left behind. There is a ceiling, but it's made of doors laid flat across splintered beams. There are walls, but they are the backs of wardrobes and the undersides of stairs. Light slides in through a seam where two boards do not meet. It travels across your cheek like a finger and stops at your mouth, which remembers the taste of smoke. You are not buried. You are nested, held by wood that creaks when the city breathes. You learn the inventory of survival by touch. Tin cup, cracked, metal, half loaf, hard on one side, ghost on the other, bread. Wool coat with a button missing that never mattered until the wind found the hole, light. Your own chest rising and falling in a rhythm that seems at once miraculous and ordinary. Breath. Silence. Always silence. Not emptiness, but a new language that has replaced conversation. Your name once fit inside the world like a key in a lock. Now it has to live inside this room that isn't. You fold it carefully and tuck it into your mouth when you hear boots overhead, or rubble shift, or voices from the street that are not cruel but not safe either. The city is full of men looking for men, and you are a woman who wishes to be a wall. When the light seam turns from iron grey to a diluted white, you crawl toward it. Your palms find brick dust and split plaster. Your knees find the splinters of yesterday's furniture. You lift one door an inch, then two, and let a stripe of day fall across your makeshift bed. The air tastes of wet soot and near water, as if the Volga had climbed the hill inside the night and checked on you. You say nothing aloud. Words draw maps. You are not ready to be found. The small work of staying. You give yourself a morning. You sip the last of the boiled water, count the matches, choose two, then decide on one. You find a nail, pierce the loaf's hard crust, and breathe on the hole until the knife can enter. The slice you cut is the size of a postcard from a friend you haven't heard from in months. You chew slowly until the bread agrees to be food again. You inventory the useful. A length of wire that used to be a lamp's thought. A spoon that remembers mouths. A scarf that smells faintly of apples because it once covered them in a cellar. Thread, needle, a bent thimble that sits like a coin on your finger. You mend. You sew a new buttonhole alongside the absent one, a quiet refusal to let the wind write on you. You reinforce a pocket with two clumsy stitches that would have shamed your mother and now look like praise. You make the cup a leash of string so it won't run from you in the dark. The city above performs its own small work. Boots sift glass. A cart squeals and stops. Somewhere someone chisels at a doorway that the bomb lowered an inch too far, the measured ping-ping-ping like a metronome for survivors. And further out, faint but present, the river's long vowel is spelled and unspelled by wind. You let the door fall back into its place and sit with the darkness. There is a comfort in the narrowness. The room agrees with you on what matters and what does not. You breathe, count, do not count, breathe again. You think of the mirror that used to hang in your old kitchen, the one that made every morning look 5 degrees kinder. You imagine it somewhere nearby, face down. When night came yesterday, you had a visitor, a radio voice that arrived the way weather does, first a suggestion at the edges, then a presence. You had wired the set yourself after the fire, a tangle of copper and persistence tucked behind the wardrobe back wall, an ear pressed against wood to make out words the air was still learning to carry again. Remain calm. Boil water where possible. Report to your district when summoned. The voice was precise without cruelty, like a nurse. Another voice followed, less official, more human, reporting that the canteen by the tram depot had lit its samovar and would give tea to anyone who brought a cup, no questions. The room keeps its silence, but your hands have already decided there will be a walk. Street of careful steps. You go out carefully, the way you would exit a church whose doors you have repaired yourself. The boards flex, the wardrobe sighs, and the seam of light widens until you are inside it. The stairwell is now an angle. You descend by memory rather than geometry, each step a guess guided by fingertips on paint that used to be green. Outside, the city has learned to lower its voice. Ash drifts sideways between buildings that lean toward each other like tired men. The snow that used to be white is now a complicated brown with moments of beauty where the sun finds it. You keep to the edges, where walls remember how to stand, and pass 3 doorways, 2 without doors. In one, a woman sits on a chair without a seat, repairing a sleeve with the concentration of a surgeon. In another, a boy salts a path with a bag of sand so old you can read last year's label on it. He nods when you pass, a small proof that recognition still exists. You move with a purpose made of many small purposes. Find water. Hear news. Return with your pulse still yours. At the end of the block, someone has built a fire inside the frame of a truck. 4 men and 1 woman stand around it, palms held out like flowers. You stop just short of the heat and borrow a little with your face. The woman offers you a piece of potato from a pan that thinks it's a skillet. You shake your head, then nod, then accept. Rituals of hunger have their own politeness. The potato tastes of dirt and mercy. You alone? One of the men asks, but not as a question for answers. You make a gesture that covers yes, no, and please. Go careful past the tram depot, the woman says, and tilts her chin in the direction of worry. Roof is loose. It decides to fall now and then. You thank her with the potato's warmth still on your tongue and continue. There are signs of a market if you know how to read after the letters have burned away. A blanket on the ground, needles, too, traded for thread, a spool half gone. A heel of soap, dearer than wine, cut into democratic squares. A man with a pair of boots, mismatched, looking for another mismatched pair to make a logic of 4. The currency is different now. Time, risk, weather, news. A woman with hair pinned up offers to cut yours for a ribbon and a story. You offer her the ribbon. She works with care, not flourish, catching the hair in her palm as if it were a fragile animal. When she is finished, your neck feels lighter, the wind sharper. She holds up a shard of mirror and makes it a lake for you to look into. You do not recognize the face that looks back, and you decide not to worry about it yet. Past the depot, the samovar waits as promised. It steams like a small machine for hope. The man behind it doesn't ask for money. He asks for names to write on a paper with a stub of pencil, a ledger of faces the city refuses to let vanish. You give him your name and feel it fit the page with unexpected rightness. Boil twice if you can, he says as he fills your cup. 3 times if the water looks at you the wrong way. You smile and the smile aches. The tea tastes like metal turned into a song. You listen, the way the room taught you. You learn that the river is a path at night for those who know how to cross a surface that remembers fire. You learn that cellars make better shelters than basements because cellars are used to holding burdens. You learn that the hospital near the square takes anyone who can still hold their own breath, asks no one to pay, and has a nurse whose voice is so calm it could put the dead to sleep. You tuck these facts inside your coat like pages torn from a book you will bind later. On the walk back, you detour to a courtyard where you once peeled apples in summer. The tree remains, leafless but articulate. Beneath it, a child kneels, drawing on the ice with a nail. Circles, lines, a house with a roof still attached. His mother sits nearby, knitting from yarn that used to be a scarf. She looks up at you, and in her gaze there is not suspicion, not exactly welcome, something more like, "We are neighbors by necessity. Take what you need from that." You lower yourself to the ice. The nail fits your hand. You draw a window in the child's house, and then another, then a door left open. He nods as if you've understood the rules, and you have. The drawing isn't a plan. It's a permission. When you stand to go, the city tilts and rights itself, a slow boat that has learned to float on land. The map you carry back. The stairwell receives you. The boards keep their promises. The room reassembles itself around your breathing. You pour the tea into the tin cup and save half because later always exists now. You fold the wire into a new shape and tie the cup's leash to a nail by the bed that is a blanket. You take off your coat and count the buttons as if they were prayers. One is loose. You fix it. Light, metal, breath, silence. The four corners of the day. You listen again for the radio because it has become the fifth corner, the one that keeps the others honest. The copper you threaded is faithful. The set surrenders a soft ocean of static that parts when the voice enters. Not the nurse this time, but someone with a soldier's vowels speaking to everyone and no one. Volunteer brigades forming for rubble clearing and bucket lines at the tractor plant and Red October. Rations to be collected by block at dusk. Civilians advised to mark shelter entrances with chalk arrows. Report suspicious individuals who ask about supply routes. The voice vanishes in a cough of distance, then returns. The enemy is close, but not yet a ring. We hold. We rebuild. We will cross the river by night with what we need and return by night with what they will not take from us. You lean your head against the wardrobe's belly and let the words find the inventory inside you. Hold, rebuild, cross, return. The verbs feel like tools you have already used today without knowing their names. You sleep in pieces now, little folded hours arranged by the city's noise. In one of them you dream of washing your hair in a basin that never empties. In another, you are a window and the world opens you at dawn. When you wake, it's because the air has changed. Subtly, the way a room changes when another person slips inside it. The seam of light is darker. The draft is a degree more insistent. You lift the door, listen. Far away and moving nearer, the first long exhale of artillery draws a line under the day. It is not the crash of bombs. It is a distant punctuation mark placed by someone with a ruler and patience. 1, then 2, then a conversation of guns that remember how to count. You do not panic. You adjust. You take the chalk you traded for a ribbon and crawl to the stairwell. On the wall at the landing, you draw an arrow that points to the door that is a ceiling, 2 quick lines that can be read in smoke by the hand of a stranger. You write a single word beside it with care and as much steadiness as your fingers can borrow. Shelter. On your way back into the room, you pass the place where the mirror used to hang. Your hand finds it on the floor by guessing. It is heavier than memory. You tilt it upright and give it the seam of light. The glass is spidered but obedient, and what it shows you is not beautiful, not terrible. It is a face in the process of understanding its job. You set the mirror face down again so it will not have to watch and return to the bed. You wrap the scarf around your neck the way your mother did, though you never learned it properly, and you practice breathing quietly until your heartbeat matches a pace you could walk if the ground were kind. Above, The guns continue their patient grammar. Between them, a bird tries a note and then another. It does not leave the city. Neither do you. Before sleep finds you, you speak once into the dark because the room needs to hear it. I am here. The boards answer with a small, wooden sigh that means, so am I. Outside, the sky tightens into a ring you cannot see yet. Inside, a woman and a city practice the same skill. Endurance. Chapter 4. Letters Never Sent. The weight of paper. It begins with a scrap. You find it in the street, half buried in ash, torn from a notebook, the corner browned, a single line still legible. We are still here. No name, no date, just those 4 words, written in a steady hand that knew its audience might never arrive. You smooth the page and slip it into your coat. It feels heavier than it should. Paper always does, when it carries breath. The post office no longer exists. The building is a skeleton with its ribs showing to the Volga. But near the tram depot, the one where the samovar once steamed like a small sun, there's a new place. A basement with a table and a single lamp run by a wire threaded through 2 walls and a prayer. People call it the post, though no mail leaves the city anymore. You go there at dusk, the hour when light pretends not to notice what it touches. The woman at the table is thin, her hands the color of candle wax. She nods toward the empty chair. You can write for them, she says, and her voice has the certainty of someone who has made peace with improbable duties. And so you begin. The letters of others. The first man cannot write. His fingers are swollen, his eyes red with smoke and something deeper. He tells you the words in bursts, like someone remembering a dream. Tell my sister the river froze early this year. Tell her I kept the scarf she knitted. Tell her I'll find her when this is done. You write slowly, your hand learning his rhythm. He watches the pencil move as if it were building a bridge plank by plank. When you finish, he nods, but doesn't take the paper. Keep it safe, he says. If it's with you, maybe it'll reach her. The next is a girl of 15, though the war has made her face undecidable. She writes to a mother she hasn't seen since the first fires. You guide her spelling, the pencil trembling under her grip. Mama, the walls are gone, but the stove still works. I found your pot. It makes soup from almost anything. I hope your hands are warm. You fold it once, twice, and tuck it into a box with the others. There are no envelopes left, only folded corners and the careful belief that corners can keep secrets. Then comes an old soldier, home from one front only to find another. He dictates to no one in particular, and yet you write anyway. To whoever finds this, we held as long as men can hold. When the bread ran out, we shared stories instead. They fed us a little. When he leaves, he places a single button on the table. Brass, dull, worn smooth by fingers. Postage, he says, and limps into the night. You realize then that the act of writing is no longer about delivery. It's about permission. To remember. To continue. The letter to your brother. When the last person leaves and the lamp flickers low, you stay. The basement smells of ink and iron, of every word that never found its home. You take a fresh sheet, one of the few left unscarred by smoke, and place it on the table. Your hand hesitates. You haven't written to him since before the fire. The last letter was full of ordinary things. The taste of summer cherries, the joke about the neighbor's radio, the complaint about the tram always being late. You remember folding it neatly, licking the envelope, believing in the postal system as if it were a small god that never slept. He never wrote back. Now, you begin again. Dear Kolya, the city is quieter now. The snow falls differently, softer, as if it knows where to land. I found your photograph in the pocket of Father's coat. The corner is burned, but your smile survived. We have a post again, of sorts. I write for people who have lost the shape of words. You'd like them. They all speak as if someone might still be listening. The Volga froze last week. You could walk across it if you wanted, though the soldiers say no one should. At night, the ice makes noises like breathing. Maybe that's how the city dreams. If you're reading this, anywhere, someday, know that I kept the kettle, the scarf, and the memory of our kitchen. The window still rattles in the wind, though the glass is gone. It's strange. The sound stayed when everything else broke. Your sister, Anna. You fold the page, but not neatly this time. Perfection feels dishonest now. You hold it over the lamp's weak light until the paper glows translucent, a small miracle, like skin illuminated by pulse. Then you blow gently, cooling it with your breath. A benediction of sorts. The archive of the unsent. In the following days, the basement fills with paper. Not piles, layers. Each sheet stacked carefully over another, as if the city were writing its own archaeology. Names, dates, unfinished thoughts, drawings, fingerprints. Some in ink, some in pencil, some in soot pressed by hand. A woman writes the same line every day. He will come home when the river thaws. A child writes to her doll, "Don't worry, we'll find you when the roof stops falling." A soldier's widow copies the same address until the letters blur into rain. You no longer sign your name to the letters you write. You've become part of the voice that speaks for everyone. And in a way, it's freeing, to belong to the city's collective handwriting. One night, the lamp fails. No light, no ink, only memory of motion. You keep writing anyway, tracing shapes in the dark, confident that the words will find their form later. The scratching of pencil against wood echoes softly, the sound of a heart disguised as routine. Upstairs, a shell lands somewhere close. Dust trickles down like dry snow. You keep your hand steady, because panic has no grammar that helps. When the ground stops shaking, you look around. The letters are everywhere now, tucked into cracks, pinned to beams, folded into jars. The basement smells of smoke, candle wax, and human hope. You gather what you can and begin moving them into the wall behind the table, a hollow space between bricks. You line it carefully, paper by paper. No ceremony, just devotion. The wall becomes a chest of hearts. When it's full, you add your brother's letter last. Not because it matters more, but because it closes the rhythm. You seal the gap with plaster mixed from dust and tears, soft enough that someone, someday, could open it again. The sound of remembering. Outside, the night has no edges. The fires are distant now, muffled by snow. You walk home beneath a sky that flickers with silent light. Artillery somewhere far enough to be someone else's problem, for the moment. Your breath hangs in front of you, visible proof that you're still writing even without paper. At the riverbank, ice groans under its own history. You kneel and press your hand to it, feeling the cold pulse of everything still alive beneath. You imagine the letters sleeping inside the wall, dreaming of destinations. The stars above Stalingrad blink in and out behind smoke. Each one feels like a word someone forgot to finish. You think of the first scrap you found. We are still here. You whisper it into the night, and the river answers with a long, low crack, as if agreeing. You turn back toward the city. The lamp in the post basement flickers once, visible through the broken windows, a heartbeat continuing on a table full of paper. You smile, small and private, the way you might at a child who has just learned to say their own name. In the morning, you'll go back. There will be new faces, new fragments, new hopes written on the backs of ration cards and torn envelopes. The city will speak again, through you, with you as you. Because sometimes survival isn't the act of living. It's the act of remembering you were once heard. Chapter 5. The ring closes. The edges vanish. The first sign isn't sound. It's absence. The river crossings fall silent one morning, and the air feels thinner, like a fabric stretched too far. 4 days, the Volga had groaned under the weight of barges, supplies, wounded, rumors, all moving in one direction or another. Now there is nothing. No horns, no voices, no engines. Only wind sweeping across the ice like a whisper that's run out of words. You stand at the embankment and listen, long after there's nothing left to hear. The world has folded in on itself. On the far shore, the last lights of the eastern bank blink like tired eyes, and you realize how far away safety has become. The Germans have closed the ring. The maps will later call it Operation Uranus, and they'll draw it with clean red arrows curving like claws. But here, it feels less like a strategy and more like weather, an invisible storm that has simply decided to stay. By nightfall, the first artillery shells begin to fall again, distant, steady, unhurried, a rhythm the city already knows by heart. The siege has returned, but now there's no outside left. You turn back from the river and see the city behind you, burned, black, yet somehow breathing. Somewhere within those ruins, your room still waits beneath its ceiling of doors. You walk toward it, your boots tracing lines in the frost that no map will ever record. The shared air. In the cellar beneath what used to be the post, soldiers have taken shelter, Soviet uniforms dulled by dust and exhaustion. They move with the quiet efficiency of men who've learned not to waste noise. Their rifles lean against the wall like tired shoulders. You carry a kettle from your corner and pour what little water you've melted from snow. One of them nods his thanks without looking up. Another passes a dented tin of porridge around, spooned in turns, each man taking only one mouthful. There is no separation anymore. Civilians and soldiers living inside the same breath. The city has become one organism, fed by smoke and frost. The youngest of them, maybe 19, pulls a harmonica from his pocket and blows a single note. It's weak, almost shy, but it fills the room like a pulse. Someone chuckles, then coughs, and the moment folds into silence again. You meet his eyes and see a boy trying on courage like a coat too big for him. Later, you take out a scrap of paper from the letterbox that survived the last bombing. You've begun keeping notes, not for anyone, just so the day doesn't vanish completely. Morning cold enough to split the air. Shared bread. First snow fell at noon, didn't melt. Someone hummed a song about spring and didn't apologize for it. You stop writing when your pencil breaks, and you tuck the stub behind your ear as if saving it might save something else. The winter finds its shape. By December, winter has learned the names of the streets. It travels them without hesitation, curling through the gaps in walls, frosting the edges of broken windows. Every breath becomes a small cloud of confession. The cold no longer startles, it instructs. You wake with ice on your eyelashes, brush it away like dandruff. The room has learned to share heat among its inhabitants. For soldiers, 2 civilians, 1 child who rarely speaks but always listens. His mother died 3 weeks ago, but he still keeps a scarf around his neck like a sentence he refuses to finish. You sew mittens from old rags, patch coats, Reheat soup that's mostly snow and willpower. At night, you write names for the dead on scraps of paper, fold them, and give them to the soldiers to place wherever the ground will take them. You never ask who they were, only how to spell them. Names deserve precision even when lives no longer can. Sometimes you go outside to fetch air, and you see the city learning new geometry. Walls turn into fortresses, craters into nests. The streets are trenches now, and movement happens only by instinct and shadow. You watch as soldiers dig into basements, carving firing holes through brick and plaster, turning parlors into barricades. One of them calls it rat war, not with contempt but recognition. You smile, thinking, rats survive. Between the shells. The rhythm of the siege is strange. There are hours when the world ends, then hours when it seems to forget. You sit in your shelter, counting the seconds between explosions, a Morse code you no longer need to translate. The artillery speaks to itself. One question, one answer, then silence again. In those silences, life reasserts itself in small, stubborn ways. A soldier warms a spoon over a candle to melt snow. A woman recites poetry to no one in particular. Someone carves a chessboard into the floor with a knife, and the pieces are bottle caps, buttons, bullets. You take the bishop's seat, and for 10 minutes, war has rules you can understand. Later, you crawl out to fetch water from a nearby crater that's filled with clean snow. The sky is grey and motionless, but the snow sparkles anyway, tiny shards of defiance scattered across ruin. You look up, and for the first time in weeks, you see a bird, small, black, darting between smokestacks. It lands near a broken statue, tilts its head, and hops closer to you, fearless. You break a crumb of bread and offer it. It takes it and vanishes into the ash. You almost laugh. Even the birds have learned not to leave. When you return, one of the soldiers hands you a letter. The others found it near the Red October factory, he says. Didn't know who to give it to. You unfold it carefully. It's blank. No words, just a smear of soot and a faint thumbprint. You nod, fold it again, and tuck it into your pocket. Every silence has a sender. The ring holds. By New Year's Eve, the city has forgotten how to celebrate. But the night still arrives, dragging frost like a blanket, and somewhere distant, fireworks of a different kind bloom against the horizon. You and the soldiers gather around a candle stub. Someone produces a harmonica again. The boy, the quiet one, claps once, a dry, perfect sound. You smile. That's enough of a holiday. Outside, the snow keeps falling, unbothered by artillery or orders. It fills shell holes, smooths the wounds of brick, and makes everything look clean again. A kindness the world doesn't deserve but offers anyway. The Germans still press in from every side, but the Soviets hold. General Chukhov's 62nd Army grips the city like a man refusing to let go of his last breath. Every street, every basement, every ruin becomes a frontier. And in that stubborn geometry, you find something like faith. In the morning, you go to the embankment again. The Volga is frozen solid, a white mirror stretching into mist. You can't see the far shore, but you can hear it. Faint thuds, muffled shouts, the slow machinery of a counterattack being born. You kneel and press your hand to the ice. It feels steady now, as if the river has made peace with its burden. Beneath it, life still moves. Dark water, unseen, patient. You whisper the same words you found months ago on that scrap of paper. We are still here. The wind carries it across the ice, and you imagine it finding another voice, another shelter, another heartbeat. The city answers with a sound that could be anything, a shell, a crack, a sigh. but you choose to hear it as breath. Because even surrounded, even starved, even frozen, the city still breathes. And so do you. The quiet between guns. Snow begins without deciding to. You sit on the low step outside the cellar where the letters once lived and now sleep in the wall. The door is propped with a brick that remembers being part of something taller. Above you, the sky is the color of cooled iron. Below, the city is an alphabet of broken lines and careful footsteps. For once, no shells argue with distance. No planes speak in metal grammar. The silence is not empty. It's upholstered, thick, a little worn, familiar in the places where elbows have leaned. You hold the tin cup in both hands, though it's only half warm. Your breath ladders up into the air and dissolves, the smallest staircase anyone ever climbed. Somewhere, someone is laughing very quietly, and somewhere else a shovel meets ice with a sound like a door clicking shut. The world has turned its volume down and left you with textures, the nap of the scarf against your jaw, the fine grit that finds your teeth when the wind changes, the weak light that still manages to make a gold of every flake before it lands. Light, metal, breath, silence. 4 corners to the moment. 4 legs on the chair of here. You think of the days before the ring, river mornings and tram bells, how heat rose from the factory floors like a promise you didn't bother to question. You do not grieve those days now. Grief is louder. This is something smaller, tidier. A drawer you open just enough to touch the folded shirts inside. You confirm the colors are still there. You close it again. Across the street, a soldier taps his boot against a charred beam to shake the snow loose. He's learned to do even that gently, as if the building were asleep and he didn't want to wake it. He notices you, nods, returns to the patient business of being. Behind him a window hangs in its frame with no wall to justify it, a square of glass reflecting nothing but sky. You've come to love those impossible windows, doors without rooms, frames that choose faith over function. The city breathes around you, all through the slow hour. It inhales as a woman opens a gate that can no longer protect anything, exhales as the gate swings back to meet a hinge that isn't there. It inhales when the snow gathers on the rim of your cup, exhales when your thumb brushes it clear. If you listen long enough, the rhythm becomes yours. If you listen longer, it becomes the river's, steady beneath the ice, a heartbeat separated from its body only by season and circumstance. Your mother's voice arrives the way the snow does, naturally, from everywhere. Keep a basin by the hearth, Anna. Even clean water can forget what it is if left alone too long. You picture the enamel bowl that survived 2 apartments, a crack sealed by pitch, the thin ring of rust around its lip like a memory that insists on being part of every meal. You think of the kettle, its small, hard music when it warms, how you learned that the first steam is a liar and the second is the one to believe. You sip the cup. The tea is more story than flavor. It tells you where it's been, a blackened shelf, a pocket that kept it from freezing, a hand that didn't keep any for itself. You accept the story and offer one back in the only language the city trusts now. Use. Your hands are chapped into maps. Red valleys, white ridgelines, a geography of work that means you belong here more than any document ever could. From the cellar behind you, someone coughs, the dry, tight sound of winter learning your name. You count out the rhythm to yourself. 5 beats, a pause, 3 beats, and tuck it away with the other small inventories that make survival feel like a craft. How many matches, how many buttons, how many spoonfuls left before the pot remembers emptiness? You run a finger down the seam of the door that is a ceiling, the grain of the wood polished to a dull kindness by months of being touched for luck. A bird lands near your boot. Not the brave one from the factory district. Another, grey as ash and twice as soft. It tips its head, makes no comment, and pecks at the snow for an answer that might be under it. You break a corner from the last biscuit you did not admit to having. The fragment feels like an apology. You set it on the step. The bird steps forward with careful entitlement, takes what's offered, and hops away without thanks. You smile at the honesty. Even small lives can serve ceremony for real occasions. The quiet persuades your thoughts into longer shapes. You think of your brother and the letter you folded without perfect edges. You imagine him reading it somewhere that isn't a place anymore, on a road that learned to be a river of boots, under a sky that mistook flares for stars. You decide that unsent letters travel differently. They don't move through space so much as through time, walking ahead to greet the versions of us that might need them later. It comforts you to believe that messages can be patient. Somewhere down the block, a harmonica tries a scale and fails on the third note. The attempt is enough. The sound threads the air between ruins like a needle pulled by a child who's learned that straight lines are difficult and unnecessary. The melody, that almost melody, finds you. You pull your scarf higher not from cold, but because the throat is where tears go when they refuse to be eyes. A flake lands on your wrist and does not melt. You memorize the pattern, 6 ways of saying yes to the world, and then breathe it into extinction without apology. Hunger asks you to economize beauty. The city teaches you to keep the part you can store. Shape, light, the idea of a pattern that returns even when it changes every time. Behind you, in the wall, sleep 100 names, 100 rooms that never existed beyond paper. You have hidden them the way the city hides warmth, in pockets, corners, the hollow between 2 bricks that agree to give up being separate. Sometimes you dream that the wall breathes and the paper flutters like the bellows of a small organ. In the dream, the letters hum the same line over and over. Not finished. Not finished. You wake with your hand against the plaster, feeling for music that leaves no vibration. The snow thickens, then thins, as if reminding the hour not to be greedy. You trace a circle in the frost on your cup and watch it vanish as the metal learns your heat. Metal is honest. It keeps no secrets about temperature, weight, the border between enough and not enough. You've come to trust it more than wood, more than glass. Wood remembers too much. Glass breaks when you ask it simple questions. A gust lifts the corner of a poster on a nearby wall. Nothing legible left, only a color that refuses to surrender entirely to smoke. You think of the market in summer, of tomatoes stacked like red coins, of the woman who weighed them with care that felt like blessing. You taste the word August in your mouth. It still has juice. You swallow and let the memory do what food can't, which is turn absence into warmth for a minute that does not ask for more. Footsteps approach. Pause. Continue. Not marching, carrying. You do not look to see who it is. The city has achieved a kind of trust that is not about safety but about predictability. People do what they do now the way rivers do, along the easiest path available, by consent with gravity, with no promises made beyond the next curve. It's enough. It has to be. Time loosens its belt. The hour does not end so much as set you down gently. A distant gun clears its throat, 1 shell, then silence again. The sound does not startle you. It positions you. You feel the city reach for its tools, discipline, habit, the inventory of small work, and you rise without deciding to. You set the cup by the door and tap it twice with your fingernail. The bell of tin replies with a thin, agreeable note. Inside, the cellar smells of wool and iron and the patient soap of snow melted 3 times. Someone has lined the stair with chalk arrows pointing toward shelter, and beneath one arrow a new word has appeared in a careful hand. Together. You touch the word as you pass. Chalk comes away on your fingertip like approval. The lamp is already lit, a weak coin against the wall. The boy with the scarf is asleep with his mouth open, learning to dream in quiet. A soldier sits with his back to the bricks, eyes closed, counting something you can't see. You take your place at the table. The pencil is shorter than yesterday and therefore more valuable. You test its point against the margin of an old form and listen for the city to begin speaking again. It does, but softly. A woman at the door with a name to spell. A list of rations to be turned into soup. A button to be convinced into loyalty. The work is so modest it feels like pride disguised as duty. You breathe. The room breathes back. The guns outside consider their next sentence. The ice on the river turns over in its sleep. The snow decides to continue. Between one silence and the next, you press your palm to the table and feel the grain lift against your skin, the ridges of a tree that once knew wind, rain, birds. You borrow that memory and let it steady you. You pick up the pencil. You write the date without month or year. You write the word we as if it were a match. It catches, and for as long as the quiet holds, you keep it lit. Hunger's alphabet. The first letter of winter is the sound your stomach makes when it remembers nothing. It comes in the hour before light, when frost grows on the nails in the beams and your breath writes script on the air. You wake to the old room, doors for a ceiling, wardrobes for walls, and for a moment you cannot locate your hands. Then the cold reminds you. Fingers, 10 small bells, each ringing a dull ache. Toes, stones at the end of a path you can't quite finish. You flex them, not out of hope, but to keep ownership. You portion hunger the way you portion tea leaves now, by faith. Half a cup becomes 2 sips, becomes one long moment held in the mouth, so warmth can pretend to be food. You cut the bread with a thread so you won't lose crumbs to the knife. You save the crumbs. You become the sort of person who can be proud of crumbs. Outside, the city speaks in winter verbs. Scrape, stamp, melt, ration, wait. The soldiers in your cellar learn to sleep sitting, so their boots don't freeze to the floor. One of them coughs blood into a handkerchief and folds it neatly before anyone can see the color. Another rubs his ears until they return from the white margin where flesh becomes a rumor. The boy with the scarf has learned to keep his hands in his pockets at all times. He counts his fingers like beads. You write the day on a scrap to keep it from wandering. Snow in the stairwell. Samovar 3 streets east, still working. 1 potato, 3 mouths. An argument that ended in laughter because no one had the strength for more. The radio finds you at noon. The nurse voice again, precise and kind. Ration notes, water warnings, a line about endurance within that makes you place a palm against your ribs as if you could feel it, like a coin in a pocket you haven't checked yet. General Winter. The soldiers call it, not with romance but resignation. You think, he is not a general. He's a schoolmaster. He teaches by repetition. He teaches the lesson that pain, divided into small pieces, is survivable. The city learns to breathe slowly. By late January, the horizon has shrunk to a sentence. You know only what the street tells you and what the river confirms. The rest is rumor sent by wind. At night, supply sleds cross the Volga in the dark, men and women hitching themselves to ropes because horses die too easily. You hear them long before you see them, a soft rasp, 2 breaths per step. When they pass beneath the embankment, you lift your head and offer the only prayer winter respects, silent acknowledgement. 1 sled loses a crate, and the sound of it sliding into the blackness below is so clean you almost applaud. But no one stops. The rope doesn't allow it, and neither does the cold. You work the post by day, a basement that is now half kitchen, half ward, half sanctuary. Winter doesn't care about fractions. You keep the kettle alive with wood the city gifts you. A chair leg, a blind slat, a piece of picture frame that used to hold a summer. You bubble soup that's mostly hot water and thoughts of cabbage. It helps. Sometimes thoughts do. The men of Chukhov's 62nd Army filter through in shifts, faces powdered with ice. They carry the city inside their coats. Notes, names, a slice of bread for a stranger. They speak of fighting at distances you can measure with the room you are standing in. 5 meters, 2, the width of a stair. Rifle shots are conversations now. Grenades, full stops. You hear a name that passes from mouth to mouth like a coal. A sniper known for patience, the kind of patience that can turn a day into a weapon. The story warms the air more than the stove does. Sometimes a woman arrives from the northern blocks with a spool of wire and a grin you trust. She crawls through walls like a rumor, tracing connections between pockets of warmth. She brings news you can believe because it's small. A baker near the grain elevator turns sawdust into bread that doesn't lie to your teeth. A nurse at the hospital has a way with frostbitten feet that feels like magic even though it is only cleanliness and time. A dog has learned the route between 2 kitchens and answers to no name. The city has learned to breathe slowly. You match it. In for 4, out for 4, again, again. Breath is the only currency that never devalues. Frost's arithmetic. Frostbite does not arrive as drama. It begins as absence, numbness that feels like a favor. You have learned to fear favors. A soldier asks you to look at his fingers. The nails are clean, unnaturally so. The skin is white, then wax blue at the tips, then a color you refuse to name. You mouse his hands between your own and rub, not hard kills, just insistently, coaxing blood back with a voice you use for frightened children and boiling kettles. Can you feel this? You ask, but the question is unhelpful. Feeling is a moving target. You make a basin of snowmelt and a handful of salt saved for days like this. You warm the water with the discipline that keeps it from scorching. You lower his hands and watch the color return in reluctant bands. He does not cry because crying wastes heat. Instead, he tells you about a window in a wall that isn't there, the way the sky looks when it discovers a room without a ceiling. He tells you about a piece of brick that became an enemy and then a pillow, and you nod as if war were an eccentric cousin you've learned to tolerate. Lice are a smaller war, constant and personal. You boil seams, air blankets, comb the boy's hair with a finder's keeper's patience. He dozes while you work, mouth open, winter trying to move in. You tuck a threadbare scarf around his neck and call it medicine. At night, hallucinations arrive like visitors who forget to knock. You see summer skirts in the corner where a coat hangs. You hear a kettle call your name when it is only the lid discovering steam. You catch the scent of apples on a scarf that has not met an orchard in months. You do not correct yourself. Sometimes the mind is smarter than the room. The long house. The front is not a line. It is a house with many rooms, and you live in the corridor. On certain days, the Germans are in the factory next door, and the Soviets are in your stairwell, and the space between is measured in the length of a breath held too long. Voices travel through pipes and walls, through the grateful geometry of ruin. You learn 3 kinds of footsteps and 4 kinds of quiet. You can tell a grenade by its dialect. You can tell a man by the way he lowers himself to sit, if he trusts the floor, if he needs a wall, if he bargains with his knees. You begin to write again in the hours the guns forget you. Not letters, lists. 8 cups, 3 spoons, 2 blankets, 1 knife, 5 names whose faces I refuse to lose. You add the day's rescue to the margin. A cat trapped in a cupboard, rescued and unimpressed. You add the day's mercy, a child's laugh. Unclear why. Enough anyway. On a morning that pretends to be afternoon, a shell takes the corner of the building above the post. Dust falls like a curtain. When it clears, a new square of sky exists in the ceiling. Cold pours down it with the confidence of a new landlord. The lamp flickers twice, decides to live. You step onto a chair and tack a blanket over the hole, then stitch its edges to the beams with wire. The wire hums to itself because metal remembers storm. The blanket moves with the building's breath. You put a hand against it and feel your own chest answer. A roomer walks in on 2 feet, encirclement reversed elsewhere, pockets forming, a counterfist closing. No one says victory, not out loud. Winter suspends nouns of that size. But the roomer warms the room anyway. Someone takes the harmonica from a pocket and does not play it. He only turns it in his hands the way one might evaluate a new tool. That night, you dream the city as a lung again, charred, scarred, still expandable. In the dream, the breath you take is shared by 1,000 others. You wake with the knowledge that this is not metaphor. It is plumbing. The quiet geometry of endurance. Starvation rearranges time. Meals are now events with ceremony and guilt. You ladle carefully, eyes taught to divide fairly without the insult of precision. You give yourself the last and smallest portion because it spares argument. It does not spare hunger. You finish and lick the spoon like a child with a stolen sweetness. No one pretends not to see. You find yourself counting heat, how many steps it takes for a breath to cool, how many breaths for a kettle to steam, how many steams before the water stops lying and becomes safe to drink. Numbers become a place to stand. You can build a day out of them without using adjectives. In the long twilights you thread needle through cloth that no longer wants to be mended. You read the cloth like a map of past injuries and future leaks. A soldier offers you a strip torn from his sleeve. You turn it into a binding for someone else's foot. The economy pleases you. Waste is now a sin with immediate consequences, and you appreciate religion when it behaves practically. The boy with the scarf brings you treasure, a handful of charcoal, a button, a flat pebble so perfectly oval it seems designed for a pocket. You praise each as if it were exactly what you needed. Often it is. One evening he draws a stove on the wall with a charcoal, square, pipe, flame. He kneels before it and warms his hands at the picture. The soldiers join him, palms out, grinning. For a minute the room has heat it can't explain. You give the moment a name and write it down. Imagined warmth equals real warmth for the length of a smile. A theorem proven once is good enough. The city tries its name. They bring in a man who will not wake. He is not dead. He is winter's apprentice, learning the deep practice of stillness. You count his pulse at the throat and find it thin, polite, undecided. You wrap his hands, his feet, the long white lengths where his shins forgot blood. You speak to him the way you were once spoken to as a child with a fever, firmly, as if you could command order back into his body by narration. Your name, you tell him, and the room listens because it is a good word, well used. It belongs to you. You say it again. You say it until the syllables feel strong enough to lift. It takes an hour, an afternoon, a lifetime of a day. Time is elastic now. When his eyelids finally give you their gray, you reward them with water sweetened by the memory of sugar. He drinks in slow decisions. You feel a rare, moving pride. Not triumph, nothing with brass. Only the quiet swell that happens when paper doesn't tear under the pen after all. You add his name to the list on the wall. The chalk is almost gone. You use your thumbnail to coax more powder from it. The soldier who once kept the harmonica holds the stub as if it were a medal, and you allow the ceremony. Even winter respects rituals that cost nothing. That night the shells are few. Somewhere something is happening that is not you. You don't ask. Ignorance is insulation. You sleep with your hand on the ledger of names and wake to find your palm white with chalk. You do not wash it off. A window learns to be sky. Morning arrives in pieces. The color of tin, the taste of teeth, the sound of someone sweeping snow from the stairs with a branch. You climb to the street and find the air clear in the way it sometimes is just after the sky has argued itself hoarse. You turn east and the sun remembers to be a coin. The factory district is a relief map of endurance. Walls braced by railroad ties, doors turned into shields, a trench that used to be a street and is now a grammar you can walk. On a chimney stump, frost flowers spread in patterns so delicate you consider kneeling. Beauty has learned to arrive without arrogance. It comes, it leaves, it refuses your opinion. You accept its terms. There, on the third story of a building that has elected to continue, hangs a window without glass. For months it only reflected absence. Today a hand appears, someone's, pinning cloth across the frame. The cloth is a color that used to be called blue. For a second you think of laundry, the ordinary flutter of it in a forgiving wind. You close your eyes and lean into that notion as if into a palm. When you open them, the cloth holds. The wind sings a new vowel as it moves around the edge. The room behind it is protected by a softness that should not survive here and yet does. You make a quiet sound that would be a laugh if it had more food. You go back down into your winter and bring the story with you. You pour it into cups with the tea. You tack it above the stove with the other papers if only to remind yourselves. Windows can learn to be sky again. The shape of after. Toward the end of the month, the air changes, subtly, like a door opening at the edge of a dream. The guns move farther away. The rumor with the coal returns as flame. The men start counting differently, not backwards from empty, but forward from a kind of beginning. You do not speak of it. You salt it like fish and set it aside for later. Inside, the winter within continues its work, patient, exacting, oddly merciful in its refusal to surprise you any more. You sleep in increments, eat in forgiveness, mend in gratitude, breathe in discipline. You write the last of the pencils into the paper you still have, each letter a small act of custody over meaning. Before sleep, you lay a hand on the wall where the letters hide. The plaster is cool, firm, unwilling to cough up its secrets. It comforts you in the way a closed book comforts. There is more, but not tonight. You listen to the building settle, the river turn in its ice, the city test its weight on new bones. You are not warm. You are not fed. You are not free. And yet, your breath remains steady enough to stack the hour. Your hands still know the work. Your name still answers when called. You lie down and fold the blanket over your shoulder so the draft becomes a mere suggestion. The boy with the scarf sleeps at your feet, the soldiers arranged like commas around the room, pausing the sentence, not ending it. The lamp gutters once, decides to live. Above you, the doors that make the ceiling creak as the frost loosens its bite. One of them shifts a finger's width and then returns, a wooden heartbeat in a house still learning how to survive its own story. You close your eyes and hold a single image in the darkness, a blue cloth in a window, a square of ordinary tamed from the wild. You keep it the way you keep a coal in a stove you cannot afford to let go out. When sleep takes you, it does so on honest terms. Your last waking thought is small and sufficient. We are here. We are here. We are here. Chapter 7. The Counterweight. The air changes first. It happens quietly, not in explosions or proclamations, but in the air itself. The cold no longer feels absolute. It carries something beneath it, a pulse, a faint throb you can't name yet. You notice it one morning while climbing the stair for snow. The sky, always colorless, now holds a tone too soft to be blue, too alive to be gray. A different wind crosses the Volga, not warmer, just curious. Even the birds, those small archivists of weather, seem to hover lower, as if listening for a new instruction. You fill the bucket, and the ice breaks differently, sharper, cleaner, like a door unlatched. When you return to the cellar, the soldiers are already whispering, not with fear, but something almost forgotten. Expectation. Rumors have found the city again, crossing through radio static and river mist. Something is moving beyond the ring, a ripple through the white silence. A counterweight forming somewhere out of sight. One man says he heard engines on the far bank, Soviet tanks rumbling across the snow. Another swears the German lines are thin, stretched like wire. A third only says, the air feels lighter. And it does. The cold, the hunger, the ruin, they're all still here, but the city's breath has changed tempo. It's no longer just survival. It's anticipation. The letters in the wall. That night, you can't sleep. The wind scratches the walls, but it sounds more like writing than weather. You light the lamp and stare at the plaster where your letters rest, a century of words compressed into a single heartbeat. Your hand moves almost on its own, tracing invisible lines over the hidden archive. 4 months, those letters were the city's pulse, written in darkness, never sent. Now, you wonder if they've started to hum again, as if the wall itself can sense that something outside is shifting, that the words might yet find their way home. You press your ear to the plaster. It's absurd, but you swear you can hear them, faint, steady, like whispering paper. Perhaps hope has a frequency of its own. You take the chalk and write on the wall, just above the seam. Not finished. Then you sit back, and for the first time in weeks, the air feels breathable, like a room cracked open to spring. The river at night. You go to the river again. It's late, nearly dawn, the hour when frost seems alive and silence learns how to listen. The Volga lies under its sheet of ice, moonlight dragging silver veins through the cracks. Halfway across, shadows move, men pulling sleds, women bent under crates. Their figures blend with the fog, but you can hear their voices, brief, purposeful, unafraid. Supplies coming into the city now, not just out. The soldiers beside you whisper the word like a superstition, resupply. Then another, softer, even more dangerous, relief. You watch as a sled tips, spilling its cargo, sacks of flour, tin cans, and one bottle that rolls toward the river's edge. A man dives after it, cursing, laughing, laughter, and the sound startles everyone. You can't remember when laughter last sounded real. It cracks the ice deeper, and still you don't mind. The river is no longer just a border. It's a bridge again, and somewhere on the far side, unseen engines are preparing their answer. The enemy feels it too. Across the frozen expanse, in streets you've never walked, the German soldiers feel it as well. Their fires burn lower. Their voices are quieter. They have begun to look over their shoulders more often, not toward the front, but toward the west. Somewhere between January and February, confidence freezes faster than water. Their generals send messages that arrive too late, their radios filled with promises the cold refuses to carry. You hear fragments of it through the walls, intercepted transmissions whispered by your own soldiers. Cut off. No reinforcements. Luftwaffe cannot reach. The words travel through the pipes like heat. You picture them, the men who once rained fire upon this city, now huddled in the ruins of their own making, gnawing the same frozen bread, listening to the same winter. History, you realize, has begun to rhyme. The city takes inventory. By mid-February, the noise outside changes again. Not the staccato of bombardment, but something heavier, steadier. Artillery speaking with confidence rather than desperation. Your building trembles differently now, not shrinking from the sound, but leaning toward it, as if listening to a long-lost friend. The civilians begin to clean. It sounds absurd, but it happens everywhere. Women sweep debris from doorways. Children scrape soot from the few windows that still exist. A soldier wipes his boots before stepping into a cellar, and the gesture feels holy. You take your ledger, the one filled with names, and add a line. The city remembers itself. Every face, every voice you pass in the street carries that same strange gravity. Exhaustion, yes, but also a quiet disbelief that life might continue. You find yourself smiling at nothing. You even hum once, softly, until the boy with the scarf looks up, startled. He grins. You realize he has grown taller without your noticing. The day the guns stop answering. It comes not as victory, but as absence. You wake to a world missing its thunder. The artillery has fallen silent, not paused, but ended. For the first time in months, the air doesn't shake when you breathe. The soldiers step outside slowly, as if the sky might still be lying. No shells, no engines, only wind. Someone starts to say the word surrender, but it feels too fragile to use yet. They whisper instead, "Finished." The boy runs ahead into the street, kicking snow that glows gold in the morning light. You follow him out, one cautious step at a time, and the sound your boot makes, that simple, clean crunch, is the most beautiful noise you've ever heard. On the wall of a building nearby, someone has written in charcoal, "Stalingrad lives." You touch it with a gloved hand. The letters smear, but the meaning doesn't. The city answers the only way it knows how, through breath, frost, and silence. You close your eyes. For once, the silence is not fear. It's peace, rough-edged and unbelievable, but real. Counterweight. At dusk, you return to your room beneath the doors. The lamp flickers once, then steadies. You sit by the wall and listen, to the letters, to the air, to the quiet hum of something ending. You take your pencil, what's left of it, and write the final entry. The city fell upward. We are still here. We were never only waiting. We were balancing. We were the counterweight. You lay the paper beside the others and blow out the lamp. For a heartbeat, darkness feels immense. Then your eyes adjust, and the faint blue glow from the cloth in the window upstairs spills through a crack in the ceiling. Cold, perfect, alive. The war isn't over. But the turning has begun, and in the quiet between breaths, you can finally feel the weight lift. Chapter 8. The Thaw. When the ice speaks. It begins with a sound that no one recognizes at first. A crack, long and deep, echoing across the Volga. Then another. The ice, faithful through months of siege, has grown restless. You wake to it in the blue hour before dawn. The air smells different, less like iron, more like wet stone. The frost on the inside of the wall is softening, droplet by droplet. You run a finger through it and watch it melt into your skin, surprised by its warmth. Outside, the streets are turning from white to grey to something like memory. Icicles fall like punctuation, sharp and fleeting. The sound they make against the rubble is clean, too clean for war. The first gull circles above the river, a single note of disbelief cutting through the stillness. You whisper to yourself, without meaning to, "It's over." The words don't sound right yet, but they stay. The return of water. By noon, rivulets appear in the cracks of the street, thin veins of water threading through ash. Children follow them, barefoot in boots too big, laughing like it's allowed again. The boy with the scarf cups his hands beneath a leak in the roof and drinks greedily. It's the first water he hasn't boiled in half a year. The soldiers stand nearby, watching. They don't stop him. They just smile. Small, crooked, human smiles that seem afraid of being too wide. You step outside with a bucket to collect the melt. It drips from the ruins like forgiveness. Slow, patient, unstoppable. Every drop hits the metal rim with the same sound. Alive, alive, alive. Inside the post, you pour it into the kettle and listen as it warms. The hiss it makes is a new kind of prayer. Steam curls toward the ceiling, tracing shapes that might be wings. You close your eyes and let it brush your face, remembering what warmth used to feel like without guilt. What the snow hid. The thaw uncovers what the winter chose to protect. Some things better left unseen, some too precious to lose. Under the ice by the riverbank, you find a photograph, its edges curled, its faces blurred but smiling. You press it flat between two planks and leave it on the windowsill where sunlight can reach it again. Someone else finds a violin case, empty but intact. A child pulls from the mud a tin soldier with no legs and decides to keep it anyway. The city exhales bodies and memories in equal measure. Teams move quietly through the ruins, marking what they find. They no longer dig for victory, only closure. You help where you can, though your hands shake easily now. Each motion feels like translation, earth back to skin, silence back to sound. The river sends up fragments of glass, bits of mirror that catch the light and scatter it like hope. You pocket one and call it spring. The return of names. The post is open again. A real one this time, a battered desk set up near the square, a line of people clutching papers, names, questions. The woman who once ran it finds you and says, "You should help." So you do. People arrive with trembling hands, asking if anyone's heard from Volodya, from Irina, from a son who left on the last ferry, from a husband who never came back from the mill. You write for them again, but the words are different now, heavier with truth, lighter with relief. There's no pretending the letters will travel. They already have. A man dictates, "To whoever survived me, I am here." You write it down exactly as he says it, and when he leaves, you copy the same line for yourself. The wall of letters you once sealed behind plaster hums quietly in your mind, a library of unsent prayers now freed by the sound of dripping roofs. Later, you open a blank sheet and write a final note to your brother. "Dear Kolya, the river is moving again. The snow is gone. I think you would have laughed to see how small this city looks without its armor. It's beautiful, in a broken way, like a song after its last note. If you're somewhere with sun, think of me here, still walking, still breathing, still writing." You fold it once and tuck it into the pocket near your heart. For once, you don't need to hide it in the wall. The living soil. Spring crawls through the city like a cautious guest. Grass grows between shell casings. Pigeons return to roofs that barely exist. The smell of damp earth replaces smoke. You help clear debris from the courtyard, shovel by shovel. When you lift a broken plank, you find a patch of soil that has thawed completely. Dark, fragrant, impossibly rich. Someone nearby drops a few seeds, leftover grain from the rations. It's a useless gesture, but everyone stops to watch anyway. Weeks later, green shoots appear. They bend under the wind but refuse to lie down. A woman cries when she sees them. No one mocks her. Everyone understands. You kneel, touch the leaf, and it feels like skin, alive but fragile, as if the earth itself is unsure of its permission to live again. The mirror and the window. The boy brings you a surprise, a mirror he found in the rubble. It's cracked, but whole enough to hold a face. You wipe it clean and hang it near the door. The first time you look, you don't recognize yourself. Your hair has turned grey at the edges. Your eyes are older than your age. But behind them, there's something unbroken, something still writing. You turn toward the window, the one patched with blue cloth months ago. It flutters gently in the warm wind, sunlight pressing through it in soft gold squares. The cloth has faded, but the color is still kind. Outside, bells ring somewhere, not for alarm, but for service. People are gathering. You hear laughter, low and unsure, like a language relearned after years of silence. The sound moves through the streets, light as thaw water. You stand for a long time, listening. It doesn't feel like victory. It feels like permission. The city that breathes again. You walk to the river at dusk. The ice is gone now, the water open, moving with purpose. Reflected in it, the broken skyline, the cranes returning, smoke rising from the first rebuilt roofs. You kneel and fill your palm with river water. It's cold, but it no longer hurts. You drink. It tastes of silt, of ash, of life continuing despite itself. You think of all that's beneath it, the barges, the wreckage, the uncounted dead. But you don't look down. You look forward, where the current flows, carrying everything unsaid toward an ocean that will never know your name. A gull lands nearby, white and perfect against the dusk. It tilts its head, unafraid. You nod, and it takes flight again, disappearing into the last light. A quiet reckoning. That night, before sleep, you sit beside the lamp and write one last entry. The city is breathing. The ice has gone, but it still remembers the shape of cold. So do I. Today I saw a blade of grass push through a crack in the pavement. I touched it, and it bent without breaking. That's what survival feels like. You close the notebook, blow out the flame, and lie down beneath the doors. Outside, rain begins, soft, unthreatening, ordinary. Each drop carries the same message in its rhythm. It's time to grow again. You listen until the sound becomes part of your pulse. And in the half-light before sleep, you think not of war or hunger or loss, but of the simple miracle that the world, against all reason, has remembered how to move. Chapter 9. The Long Return. The Shape of Morning. The first mornings of peace are almost unbearable in their gentleness. You wake to the sound of rain that doesn't hide artillery inside it, and your body doesn't know how to respond. For months, every noise meant movement, every silence meant waiting. Now, even stillness feels like a decision you haven't learned to make. The room looks the same, the ceiling of doors, the blue cloth at the window, but the light behaves differently. It lingers. It drifts across the floor as if mapping a new country. You lie still, watching it crawl from the wall to your hand, and think, so this is what continuous looks like. When you rise, your knees ache, but the ache no longer feels like warning, only proof that the world still includes you. The kettle hums on the stove. Someone has left bread on the table, a whole loaf, unshared. You tear a piece off carefully, almost reverently, and eat it slowly, afraid the taste might vanish if rushed. Outside, the city is practicing how to breathe in daylight again. You decide to join it. The street learns its name. You walk through streets that have been promoted from trenches back to avenues. The names are being repainted by hand. Lenina, Kommunistikeskia, Berakodi, words once whispered over the radio, now written in paint that gleams in the sun. The air smells of wet brick and coal smoke, of rebuilding. Everywhere, people are repairing what can be repaired and forgiving what cannot. Windows are patched with cardboard, roofs with tar paper. A woman hammers a nail into a beam, humming a lullaby older than the war. Children chase one another around a pile of bricks, shouting the names of months as if calling them home. You pass the square where statues used to stand. Now it's filled with scaffolds, planks, laughter, arguments about nails. A man on a ladder turns, dust in his hair, and waves at you as if you're an old friend. You wave back. It feels strange, this exchange, casual, alive, unnecessary in the best way. You find yourself smiling without reason. The city, it seems, is contagious. The letters come back. At the post, a real mail sack arrives, canvas frayed, rope knotted, the smell of rain and distance in its folds. Inside, letters, hundreds of them, some for the living, some for the dead. No one knows which is which yet. You volunteer to help sort them. The ink has run, but the names are clear enough. Anya, Kotia, Ivan, Kolya. You trace your brother's name in the stack, knowing it won't be there, but looking anyway. When it isn't, you feel no disappointment, only recognition. He has already answered in silence, in the fact that you're still here to ask. The boy with the scarf sits beside you, licking envelopes. He laughs when one sticks to his hand, and you realize he's lost that scarf, grown past it, outlived it. He hands you a letter addressed simply to whoever stayed. You keep it. There's something perfect about the uncertainty. The work of remembering. By June, the grass has grown thick around the ruins. Flowers rise between the stones, purple, yellow, white, small defiant banners. The city council meets in what used to be a cinema. Men and women speak in sentences built from hope and exhaustion. Words like reconstruction, waterworks, school, memorial. They argue gently, as if afraid to wake the past. You help at the hospital now, washing linens, boiling instruments, writing names. The beds are full, but no longer with the dying, with those learning how to move again. A man with one arm insists on buttoning his own shirt. A woman with burned lungs insists on singing anyway. You begin to understand that healing has a sound. Not music, not words, just motion. One evening, the nurse from the radio finds you. She's younger than you imagined, her voice softer in person. You wrote for others, she says. Now write for yourself. You nod but don't answer. Some habits, even merciful ones, take time to unlearn. The long return. The day comes when the trains start again. The platform trembles under the weight of arrivals. Mothers waiting with flowers that wilt in their hands, children holding signs too large for them, soldiers stepping down with a careful disbelief of ghosts relearning gravity. You stand among them, not expecting anyone. You came to watch the living find each other. When the whistle blows, you close your eyes and listen. The same pitch that once meant evacuation, now meaning homecoming. People cry, laugh, call names that echo across the rails. You let the sound wash through you like river water. Someone touches your arm, a stranger offering you tea from a flask, smiling without reason. You drink. The tea tastes of metal and mercy. You hand the cup back and say, "Thank you." Two words that once meant survival, now meaning everything else. What the river keeps. You visit the Volga again at dusk. The water runs free now, carrying driftwood, flowers, and pieces of roofs downstream. The ice has long gone, but the current still hums with memory. You kneel and dip your fingers in. The water no longer bites. It only holds. You whisper your brother's name. It travels outward, dissolving into ripples. No echo comes back, but you don't need one. You feel his presence the way the river feels its source, unseen, undeniable. The boy joins you, tossing a stone that skips twice, then sinks. You smile at the sound. You remember the promise you once made to the wall, not finished. Now, you understand what it meant. Some stories aren't finished. They're simply passed forward, like breath. The quiet of rebuilding. Nights are gentle now. Windows glow again, not bright, but steady. You pass one house where a woman plays piano with two fingers, the rest of her hand bandaged. The tune falters, then finds itself, and the air bends to listen. You stop by the old post basement. The wall with the letters still stands, streaked with moisture and dust. You brush it with your palm. It feels warm. For a moment, you hear them again, the murmur of all those unsent words, blending with the city's new heartbeat. Then the sound fades, leaving only your breath. That's enough. You whisper a final line to the wall. Rest now. We'll take it from here. Light on the water. Summer arrives in full. The river sparkles. The factories hum. The sky, once a ceiling of smoke, now opens like forgiveness. You walk through the city's heart, past the market, the rebuilt tram lines, the scent of bread so fresh it almost hurts. People wave. You wave back. It feels simple again, and that simplicity is holy. At the embankment, children splash near the shallows. The boy, no longer the same boy, taller now, sure of his laughter, throws water at you. It lands cold and perfect on your sleeve. You laugh, truly laugh, and it startles even you. The city, hearing it, seems to laugh too. You imagine it rolling through the streets, bouncing off the new windows, echoing down the river, turning war into story and story into song. You look at the horizon, wide, open, shimmering. It's no longer a line you fear. It's a direction. You whisper, softly but without hesitation. We came back. And for the first time since the war began, the wind does not answer with silence. It answers with applause. Epilogue. The river still remembers. Present light. You stand by the Volga again, years later. The river is wider now, its surface smoother, but the wind still smells faintly of iron and rain. Morning sunlight breaks in ripples, turning the water into slow gold. Children run along the embankment where the ruins once stood, their laughter folding neatly into the air. Behind them rise apartment blocks and cranes, glass towers catching the light. Somewhere beneath all that, under the asphalt, under the quiet, the old foundations remain. A city rebuilt not on its scars, but with them. You trace the railing with your fingertips. The metal is cold, alive, trustworthy. Every few steps, you pass a plaque. Names, dates, small prayers hammered into bronze. The list goes on until it stops meaning death and starts meaning memory. Someone lays fresh flowers at the base of the memorial. Another adjusts a child's hat. Life, so ordinary it feels like triumph. You breathe in, and the air no longer carries fear. Only echo. Only peace that has learned humility. The city beneath the city. If you close your eyes, you can still feel the other Stalingrad below this one, the one of brick dust and door ceilings, of blue cloth windows and names written in chalk. You can almost hear Anna's pencil scratching in the dark, her voice whispering the day into existence, her hands coaxing warmth from a kettle that remembered faith better than fire. No monuments mark her room, no plaques spell her name. But you can find her if you know how to listen, in the way the wind moves through the alleys, in the way the rain hums on tin roofs, in the way every passerby unconsciously softens their step when walking past the old district. There are stories the stones remember even when no one speaks them aloud. This city has made peace with its ghosts, not by silence, but by coexistence. The letters beneath the wall. In the museum by the square, the one built on the site of the old post, there's a wall behind glass, its plaster cracked but intact. Inside, folded and yellowed, they found them, the letters. Hundreds of them, still legible, still human. Curators wear gloves to turn them now, but you imagine how they once trembled under ordinary fingers. How breath once hovered above each page before the ink could dry. One is addressed simply to Kolya. Another, unsigned, ends with the line, "The city will remember us." And it has. Visitors stand quietly before the display. Some bow their heads. Others whisper to their reflections in the glass, perhaps hoping their words might join the ones preserved inside. You watch as a small girl presses her hand to the panel, and the guard doesn't stop her. Behind the glass, her palm meets Anna's handwriting, separated by 80 years and the thinness of mercy. The river's voice. You walk down to the water's edge. The tide has risen slightly, brushing against the lower steps. The sound it makes is patient. A slow conversation between stone and time. You take off your gloves and kneel. The river is cold, but not cruel. You cup it in your hands, the way she once did, and the reflection it gives you holds both faces, yours and hers, briefly united by motion. You whisper into the current, "We are still here." The ripples take it, fold it into themselves, and carry it east. You know they'll bring it to the sea, and from there to everywhere else that remembers listening. The weight and the light. Evening settles softly over Volgograd, a new name for an old soul. The city glows from within now, lights rising from windows instead of fires. You walk toward the hill where the statue stands. The motherland calls. She lifts her sword toward the sky, and for a moment you think she's not calling for vengeance, but for balance, for the counterweight that turned despair into endurance. The wind-up here sounds like pages turning. Below, the river gleams under moonlight, a silver scar, a living thread. You take one last look at the water, and it's no longer about sorrow, no longer about survival. It's about continuation, the quiet agreement between memory and mercy. The whisper of after. Before you leave, you pause. The air is cold, but kind. The city, the river, the letters, the silence, they all hum together now, one low note of peace. You think of Anna, of her blue cloth window, of the boy with the scarf, of the bread divided, the names written, the mirror left face down. They are not stories anymore. They are foundations. You close your eyes and listen. The wind carries the same sentence she once wrote in her notebook. The city is breathing. And it is. You've been part of Echoes of War, where stories rise on quiet wings, and the past still circles above us, refusing to land.